Hi, I'm Andrew Armstrong and welcome to the Back Office Teardown Lab. You catch me mid-project. I'm just soldering some very tiny surface mount components. Not sure if you can see them. They're almost like dust, so you've got to be awfully careful when you're doing this. Oh no, they've got... Hang on. Ah! Hi, I'm Andrew Armstrong and welcome to the Back Office Teardown Lab. Today I'm going to show you a way of keeping all of your tiny little components in one place so that when you're working on them there'll be no mishaps at all. So for this project you are going to need the following items. A silicone tray mold. Now you can buy these on eBay and they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. They're made of silicone. You can see that, and if you see the pattern, it's basically a dish. So that's the lip around the edge, and then that's the base. So you're going to need that. You're going to need some epoxy resin, and this is a 2-pack epoxy resin. Though pretty much all the best ones are, and this is Axon Epolam 2017. Now Axon Epolam 2017 is really good for if you're laying down fiberglass or carbon fiber or all those sorts of laminate materials. It's not great for molding because it is a slight amber color, so whatever you mold is going to take that slight sheen, but depending whether or not you're bothered about that, you can use this or use a clearer variant. I do have other resins on the shelf, but all of those are toughened resins with fiberglass mixed in, so they will be very opaque and very white. So you don't want that for that project. And also, of course, the other resins I have are fast setting. You want a slow setting resin. To start this project, it's pretty simple. You really are going to have your mold ready, and just leave that aside. Have it clean though, you know. Give a blowout of it when it comes from the out of the jiffy bag from China. Make sure that you have a reasonable way of measuring. So I'm not sure you can see the screen there. That's saying, well, it's saying 49 grams. So let's tear that. So you want to get your cup on there, mark it to 0, and then we're going to take the large part of your resin kit and we're going to pour 100 grams. So this will be 100 grams. That mold actually is a little over, I don't know actually the volume, but from previous experience, if you mix this up, which is 100 parts of resin to 30 parts of hardener, you will fill that mold nicely. So we're at 100 there. Now I don't think I'm going to be able to fit all this in this particular container, but we'll have a go. We'll have a go. And again, that's the beauty of this being a resin with a longer gelling time. It's not too long. You've got about an hour or so. We're just going to top that up. And you should really give these a good old shake before you use them. But there you go. So that's the 2 parts added. Now what I'm going to do though is remove the scales and put something down on here to protect this. But if you're working with resin on surfaces that are plastic or resin, any drips will eat each other, so be very careful. So you can see I've got a nice metal base now, and that's really useful. You definitely will need something similar because you will not want any flex. Once you pour this out, you'll want to have a nice sturdy tray because these are flexible. Once that's full of resin, it's going to have the potential of going anywhere. Now I recommend, if you've got a clear beaker, use a clear mixing beaker because this resin is quite hard to see when it's mixed. You can see from the colour it doesn't really change too much, but you'll feel it in its viscosity. And if you look at the technical specifications, the viscosity of the larger portion, the main resin rather than catalyst, is significantly higher, like 100 times more viscous. So you're really trying to keep going until you feel it uniform and that pull doesn't vary. And you can see it's very much, well, I suppose you can't really see because it's dripping down, but it's very much like honey. You want to keep mixing it until you get it from a honey into a maple syrup. I've been mixing for a few minutes now. You can see that they are still these kind of lines, striations going through it. You want to keep mixing till they are pretty much gone. Now, just a word of warning, the components of epoxy resin can be highly irritating. So You really don't want to get that on your human flesh. And I do believe it is one of those things that's cumulative. So maybe you'll splash it on you today and it's not a problem, but then you'll splash it on you tomorrow and it'll kill you. It'll just go up your arm like poison ivy. And don't ask me how I know that. I'm very cautious because I know that I have an issue with resin, and I definitely don't want to get any on me. Also, if you are in a enclosed space, you really want to get those windows open, because you'll tell by the time you get to this far in your mixing that it is quite pungent, and it's probably toxic when it's in this case. But I think we're almost there. What I could do is decanter it from one cup to another. That might aid the process. When you've got to the point that you're totally bored and you figure, yep, that's enough, just take out your measuring stick and just put on a bit of plastic or something. You might use that again. That's a good old stick, that is. Good quality stick. Look how thick it is. It's off a lolly of some description. I don't know what it was though. Certainly not a Magnum. They don't have a slippery thin stick like that. Now this is getting quite warm. This is actually quite warm. So what I like to do, after giving it one last blow, and careful, it is warm, you know it is activating then, is from quite a height, pour it so you get a nice thin stream, and the thinner the stream, the better, because it prevents air bubbles. You can see I'm nearly right up at my camera, which is, ooh, that's nearly a whole, maybe 2 foot thereabouts. And you can do that, or you can just do it low, keep that thin stream. But the idea is you don't want any air bubbles if you can avoid it. So the thinner the stream, the better. And just fill that mold incrementally so there's no possibility of air bubbles getting stuck in there. So you can see that's a nice uniform fill. And I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to top it off. Now, depending on how you want to run the mold, you might fill a little bit and then wait and put some stuff in, because we didn't even talk about that yet. I'm putting stuff in this. In fact, I'm not going to use all of it. I'm just going to give it a wipe and leave that there. We'll just save a bit for the end. And I do have some objet d'art that I can invest in that, because I make a lot of PCBs, because I have a lot of projects all the time, and I have loads of PCBs, I have loads of shrapnel, I have loads of busted parts from people maybe sometimes blowing something up. I'm looking at you, Derek. I'm going to bend the legs back on this actually, because I think it's a bit pokey, so that's an IC. And let's zoom in so you can see what I like to do. I'm going to put this nice shiny sticker on here, because I can, and I'm going to give that a little buff on my t-shirt. Now the downside is when you're laying these big flat objects is that air bubbles can get caught on them, so you kind of want to scoop them. I think that's the best way to describe it. So decided which way's up. We're going to swoop it in like that, just to give, ooh, gentle, don't overfill the mold, just to give a chance for the air bubbles to work their way out towards the end as we're doing that. I'm going to take some tweezers, because you don't want to touch any of this. In fact, I can see that this isn't level. It's all shifted over. I'm just going to shimmy it. What can we shim it with? Underneath there, that should be a good wedge. Yeah, brilliant. And you can see that's automatically working now. So I'm going to pop this over into a corner like that, say. There are air bubbles in there, and I'll show you how to deal with those in a moment. That's an Atari ST RAM board. We have a RetroNet V3 PCB, which I think will fit quite nicely in there. That's a good old dunk, that one. And we have the RetroNet V1, which I have an alarming amount of BOM for, so maybe one day we'll actually make more of those, because we should probably try to get rid of some BOM. Who would want a RetroNet V1 kit? The interesting is I can probably make you a Super RetroNet V1, which would have a more advanced firmware. Let me know, because we spent a lot of time investing in firmware development on that. I have the Booby Logic, what do we call that? Logic probe. Pop that in there, get that in there nicely. And you can see you can just rearrange them as you want, but there's a little scum on the top, and that's going to potentially be an annoyance. If you think of all these objects, they're kind of dirty. Yeah, they've got fluxes on them, they've got just dust and all those. That scum will float to the top and give us something to have to deal with later. We'll actually have to sand that out or buff it out, so best to avoid it if you can. And now we're going to go for the small items, the little knickknacks, the juicy knickknacks. Nice little capacitor, 1 microfarad. It's interesting. I'm just wondering what these are from. Various power supplies, BBC Micro perhaps, Sega Game Gear. I think these are a bit big for a Game Gear. I've got rid of those. Let's pop that there. My eyes are a little bit stingy now. You know, this is giving off a bit of a hum. Make sure you got a nice open window. It is an acid if I'm not mistaken. This is a Nintendo 64 LED. We can put that in there. And I'm just going to trim with my side cutter some of those long legs. So you don't want anything that's going to protrude into the silicone mould and then potentially stab out later in an annoying way. In fact, that component looks like it could be a little bit on the thick side for what we want, but let's roll with it anyway. Position all your bits, and what's good, if you see any air bubbles, you need a pokey thing, and you could use a toothpick or just a tip of a metal screwdriver is what I use. I think this is looking pretty good now. I think we can almost leave that as is. And if you can get the air bubbles to the top, you can just hit the top with a bit of heat from your hot air blower, and that will pop them too. So don't worry about it. You have a bit of time though. You've got over an hour of gel time before this will become unworkable, and at that point, if you work it, I think gel time is defined as the point where it becomes thick enough to become unworkable, and if you work on it beyond that, its properties will be undefined, like a variable. It will become undefined, like unpredictable, basically is what they're saying. Oh, there we go, going for the fill. Now I'm going to try for the deep fill here, so we're going to rely on a meniscus to form. You know when you're a kid and you're filling a cup and it's, oh my gosh, it looks like, I'm just going to go and, yeah, it's looking like it's almost at the edge in many places basically at this point. Look at that. Basically, the fuller the better, really. You can go over, don't go over, but the fuller the better. And I think that is pretty much it. Any last second adjustments, now's a good time to do it. Be careful though. You don't want to break that meniscus and let it all run out. That's why you use tweezers, so you can fetch them back. I don't want things to go too near the edge because you might not see them nicely. And I'm just going to bring this one in a bit. There. I think that's quite nice. Oh, I almost forgot the garnish. I want to show you the garnish. If you are doing this and you do have spare components, I accidentally order sometimes components wrong, and I've ordered these which are way too tiny for any sensible project right now. They're smaller than anything I really want to use today. In fact, I'll just show you them. They're like dust. If I hold them there, I don't know if the camera will focus on them, they're so tiny, but yeah. That is absolutely a resistor you do not want to design into your project. So what I like to do is I'm just unwrapping one of those, and you can see I've got it there. I just apply it like dust. I'm just sprinkling it, a generous sprinkling, because it's, as I say, no use to me. I don't really think it's of use to anywhere. This whole strip would cost you, I don't know, 5 pence, maybe less. Ah, got in the resin there. So just pop them in as a curio for anyone staring and they think that it's not quite clear enough. You can say, well, yeah, those are tiny resistors, and when they look closely they'll see them. So let's just pop this on a shelf for a day. And here's one we made earlier. You can see it's nice and solid in there. It really could probably do with another day of curing, but this is enough certainly for us to take it out. When you look at the surface like here, you can see there's some slight blooming, and it does feel that little bit tacky. but I can't wait. I've got to get it out. What that means is when it cures though, I am going to have to polish this, and you can do that with just some wet and dry. You know, start with I don't know, a 600, then a 1000, then a 1300, you'll get that to a mirror finish. Also, you will notice in this case, I'm going to hold it up just like that, there is a little lip, so you could fill this up a little bit more. So you could just really not worry too much about that, or polish it very slightly and then fill it up, you know, top it up. And the reason people do that, of course, is they might mix a coloured resin or an opaque resin for the base. But here I don't mind, because you can see both sides, you know, you can see both sides of the board. There's something interesting to see in there. You can see it's a slightly different makeup than the other I don't know what this would really be, paperweight, because this has got more surface mount components. And if you look super close, in fact I'm going to try to show you before I take it out, there are these items in here that look like dust, and those are little teeny resistors. But yeah, you can see that, really see that blooming under the camera there. But you can see there, just that was a bit of a wet finger. You can just polish that out, but don't lick your finger after that, because that will not be good. Right, so I'm just peeling it off around the edge cautiously, and I'll probably end up sitting this aside for a little while longer, you know, before I put it to use in anger. And depending on the resin you have, this curing time will vary. So the resin we're using today, of course, is not really for this purpose, but there are other resins more specifically for it that will cure way quicker. So you can see it's looking actually pretty cool. I'm very excited. This is the first time doing this in this type of mold. What? That looks pretty good. My word, that looks, actually, I'm quite impressed. I'm going to zoom in so you can see that is a really nice finish. It's got a slight amber look. If I turn it this way, you might just see that resin is an amber resin. Like I say, it's not a molding resin. It's a resin for painting layering with. But it's very interesting looking at the layers, because the PCBs are at this top layer where they've sunk to the top, and you can see this chip here is nearly all the way through, and all of the little surface mount components are basically, they would be floating on the top here. Wow, even though I poked them down. And then that can live like that. That's pretty cool. I mean, if you see there's some air bubbles and stuff in here and you don't like those, you could just pour some resin in the top or brush that inside there. But you've got this lovely sharp edge here, and that's a very nice curio. If you want to remove all the air bubbles, of course, you have to put this in a pressurized vessel and squeeze it, compress it, and it'll make the bubbles so tiny, and you have to leave it there till it cures. But let's test this out. I've got some components here. You want to keep track of all of your component headers. There you go. Now just leave that on the side while I'm working on something, and not lose them. And it's definitely sturdy enough. In fact, I always have an issue with my solder reel sliding off the desk, and that certainly could offer a way of keeping it at bay. I might customize that. So there, I hope you've learned something today. I know I have. It's really easy to do this. It doesn't cost you too much. So just recap on the costs. It's about £6 for the mold, and I think it's all in all about, let's say, £20, £22 for the resin, and everything else you'll just have lying around. So there you go. If you'd like the opportunity to win one of these, please head over to Patreon. I'm going to do a tombola or something on Patreon, and if you want to buy one, I might make a few and sell them on my shop at backofficeshow.com. Please bear in mind it is handmade, so you might have to finish it a little bit better. I mean, I'm not sure I've got the willpower to go and sand that lip off there. You can take care of that. I think you'll leave it as is. It's fine. As ever, thank you for watching.